Thank you for tuning in to the Global Elite Academy. If you want to open a non medical home care agency, please go to globaleliteacademy.net. That's globaleliteacademy.net. Thank you so much for tuning in to how to get your own home care agency. Now, tonight, what I want to do is I want to tell you about what cities are regulated. So if you want to open up your own home health agency and you're in a state that doesn't have regulations, then you don't need a license to open up an agency there. Now, you do still need a license if you're going to open up IHSS, which is a community-based service for low income to be able to afford home care in their home and Medicaid pay for it. You're still able to do, you still have to get a certification, apply for a license for that. But for a non-medical agency in certain states, the ones that are unregulated, you do not have to get a license from that state. Now, what I do, I'm going to give you a list of all the states. Now, what I would still advise you to do, you still want to get a policy and procedure manual. Because what that means is basically anybody can open up a home health agency and it's not regulated. So you have nobody looking over your back, nobody telling you what rules you have to follow. And that can lead to a disastrous business. So you want to make sure that you are still running a professional business that goes by the state guidelines, even though you don't have to be licensed. In order to do that, you still need to set it up professionally. And you need to have that policy and procedure manual and all of your forms. So in other words, you still need to run that business as if it was regulated. Now, when you open up an agency in a state that is not regulated, the only thing you have to do legally is just apply the business name. Are you going to be a LLC, corporation, or individual? So you still need to set up the structure of the business. You still need to get insurance on the business, because if a caregiver, let's say, is snowing outside and they go to a patient's house and fall, and then they want to file a lawsuit because they fail, you need to still have coverage covering all of your caregivers, that's going out to the patient's house if anything is stolen or anything like that. So you still want to still have your liability insurance. Let me see. You still want to set it up, structure it correctly. And you want to have like I said, the policy and procedure manual. Now you want to be able to get, if that state requires, or is offering, I should say, IHSS in support home care services, you still want to offer that. And again, you have to get licensed for that. So, let me see. Usually in some states where it's unregulated, they usually have some type of association that you can join. And that association tries to keep you in compliance of a professional business or what you should do. Like in Arizona, I don't know the name of it right off, but it's a home care association that you could join, and they require you to have your policy procedure manual. They require for you to be set up just like you were regulated. So in each state, whether it's regulated or not, I'm sure there's association like that. And we'll have to go into that later because I'll go into each state separately and tell you what you need in each state to be able to run your agency. Right now, this is just a quick overview of the different states that are unregulated. Instead of me going one by one, I'll still go one by one and explain them all, but we'll do that. I just want to right now just tell you what they are. So the states that are unregulated, which means they do not require you to get a license to run a home care agency, is Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, New Mexico, North Dakota, South Dakota, West Virginia, and Massachusetts. Now, what has probably changed on this list is New Mexico. Because I think New Mexico has changed and they do require a license. So, yeah, some of the states, this is the last update I have, but some of the states, might have changed or changed the law. So you want to check it out to be sure. The only one I think has changed it, though, is New Mexico. I think now in New Mexico you need a license. I think that's a regulated state. So that's the only one I'm going to take off from here, New Mexico. But the other ones I named, I know that they're, I've checked them out recently, and theirs is all the ones I named. So let's just name them again. Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, Iowa, Michigan, Mississippi, Nebraska, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, West Virginia, and Massachusetts. These are considered unregulated, and you do not need a license to open up a home health agency. Now, that doesn't mean, again, that you do not need to be professional, have policy and procedure manuals and, your liability insurance and all that other stuff. You still need to operate professionally because people are not going to, I don't even know if the public would even know that it's an unregulated state. But they're still going to be judging you on your professionalism. You know what? If a customer comes to you to get care for their loved ones, they should not be able to tell by talking to your agency that the state does not require a license, because you should be just as professional whether they had one or not. Which means so in Colorado, they require a license, which means that every year it is mandatory for the caregivers to have had continuing education. If a state is not mandatory, you have nobody checking that. if the state is unregulated, who's going to check it to know? You will know. Always tell yourself you will know. So just because Michigan, let's say for example, is an unregulated state, you still want to give your caregivers education, make sure they have yearly education. Even though there's not going to be anyone looking over your shoulder to see if they have it, you still need to give it. So every year, you should still offer your caregivers continuing education, whether it is mandatory or not. You should still, in other words, follow the rules that the other states, the regulated states, set. So a regulated state is setting that caregivers need to have continuing education yearly. Now, just because your state, Michigan, we're using that as an example, is not regulated, don't say, oh, well, I'm not going to even give them continuing education, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that because nobody's watching over my shoulder. That's not running a professional business. You still want your business to be professional. So you'll say, well, okay, Ohio is regulated, and it requires for caregivers to have yearly education, continuing education. So I'm going to do that as well. You understand what I'm saying? Still have your agencies follow the same policies as if they were a regulated state. Because you want to have a professional running business. People are going to come to the business that operates the most professional. You will get a whole lot of complaints if customers come to you and you're not operating in a professional way. There was an agency here, this was a long time ago when I was doing care, when I was a CNA, which is certified nurse assistant. There was one agency back then that was very unprofessional. A lot of places used to use them because they had a lot of caregivers, and they had been around. This was like in the early 2000s, and they had been around since 64. They would just sell the business and somebody else would buy it and just keep the name. But the business, the owner that had it, in the early 2000s just wasn't operating in a professional way. And the business, Colorado was a regulated state, so it had to get licensed and everything. But there were so many patients complaining. When I would go to a patient's house, I wasn't even a part of this agency. And when I would go to a patient's house, they would just tell me, oh, that agency, they've sent you out a lot of different caregivers. Every day they'll send you a new caregiver. They're not good. The caregivers talk about their business all the time. It was just a lot of complaints. Because that agency was very unprofessional. But the agency was well known because hospice and a lot of different hospice businesses used to give out their names. So they were making plenty of money because they were very well known. But eventually they stopped giving out their name. And eventually they started losing business because people were complaining about the service. Start complaining about the caregivers. So you want to always make sure you are running a professional business. So now, as we go forward, in the future, I'm going to be breaking this down as to, the professional. What do you need to also run these agencies? What all is required? So thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good week.